watched Logan Paul's video on suicide, his kind of abortion of an attempt at a PSA, and it was only like 7 minutes long, and a full third of that, I think, was him talking about, oh, I made a mistake, etc., etc. It made it about him, really, for the most part. There was a brief talk with someone from a suicide prevention network, and a brief talk, which was the only really useful part of the whole thing, with someone who had tried to kill themselves and failed by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, I think. Now, for people who are new to the channel, I've had a fair few new subs. I suffer from clinical depression and anxiety, and I have attempted to kill myself various times, and I still suffer from suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts. So I feel that I should comment on all of this, and I haven't really up until this point, for various reasons. I've not been well for the last few months, so tackling this kind of subject, it didn't feel particularly healthy to do over and over again. Some people think the whole thing was fake. That's certainly Mundane Matt's opinion. I don't know. I'm not willing to call it either way, and at this point it doesn't really matter whether it was fake or not, because the whole situation's just out of hand. But this 7 minutes, a full third of it narcissism, generic bland suicide prevention advice, and maybe 2 minutes of useful footage. It's an attempt to deflect. It's a PR stunt. At the same time, we've had other members of his family coming forward and talking. It's all about Logan Paul, and it shouldn't be about Logan Paul. And yet I'm going to title this using his name and tag it using his name, because that way it'll draw attention to this. So what is it actually like being depressed and being suicidal? Are these helplines that you're supposed to call any good, and what can you actually do to help someone who feels the way that I do on regular occasions? Well, the helplines are largely no use at all. They can't give you any useful practical advice. They can't refer you. All they can really do, all that they're really allowed to do, is to listen. That can be enough. That can be helpful sometimes when you're right at the absolute end of your tether. But there's no practical assistance that comes out of that. There's nothing useful that comes out of that situation. It doesn't help you deal with anything long term. Maybe they can give you some other numbers to call, or charities with free advice, or whatever else, but really it's nothing. It's a last ditch, in that moment, attempt to stop someone, which is worthwhile, don't get me wrong, but it's not the be all and end all. It's not the panacea to prevent people from killing themselves. That's not going to do it. And it's all anonymous to protect you, but then if you're at the point of killing yourself, yeah, more intervention might be needed. What it's like, it's different for everybody. I can only really speak to myself, but it hits you the way grief does, or guilt, or shame. Only it doesn't fade and it doesn't go away so much, and it comes back, at least if you have clinical depression and not situational depression. It keeps coming, and it comes in waves. It never really leaves you. It's like being tracked and dogged. I mean, that's why I think Churchill called it the black dog, because it's always hanging around, always following you. Feels like it's tracking you down. You can kind of sense it coming, sometimes a particularly bad wave, and it's not the same as being sad. It is crushing. That's why I've used the comparison to grief in the past. You know, when you lose someone, that person is gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that's how the sadness of depression feels. You can maybe distract yourself from it. Maybe you can drown it out with drink or drugs or pain from cutting yourself, or you can push it back by getting to that edge of suicide and deciding you want to live, maybe. But it is just relentless and grinding, and it makes everything seem pointless and worthless, and just the things you need to do day to day to survive. Make a meal, do any work, get out of bed, even get dressed. These are all obstacles. They're all really difficult to tackle. And you want to die because you feel like you're worthless, and you feel like this grief, this shame, this guilt is never going to end. And it is unbearable. Absolutely fucking unbearable. I mean, imagine, most of you have probably lost someone, or a beloved pet or something, and you know that pit of grief that you were in when that happened. And that's what it feels like. Only it's directed at yourself. It's like you've died, and you don't feel that you can ever come back from that. So you might as well die for real, just to make that pain end. And you know it's not gonna stop by itself. And even if you do manage to get it under control with drugs and therapy and time and effort, it's gonna come back. So even when you feel relatively well, there's this sense of foreboding and dread that feeling is gonna come back again. A lot of people say suicide is selfish. Why don't you think about the people you're gonna leave behind, and all the people you're gonna hurt, or the people who are gonna have to clean up your body, or whatever else that goes on. But it's not a selfish act. In the moment, in your head, it is a selfless act, because you must be a burden to people. And you are, really. People will say that you're not, and will say that they want to be there for you and everything, and they mean it. They really do. But when you can't work, you have to be carried. And you're a bad friend, because sometimes you just don't feel like going out or seeing people or talking to people in any way, and so you end up ghosting the very people who will care for you and look after you the most. Not because you hate them, not because you're withdrawing necessarily on purpose, but just you can't handle being around people, or you don't want to be that burden. You don't want to bring people down. You don't want everything to be about you and about taking care of your needs. And you are a burden because you need looking after. People need to take the time to care and chase you up and so on. And even if they do, you're probably going to push them away, because you feel like that burden that you genuinely are. And people will deny it, but you are. You can't help that fact. You're a downer. You're a bummer. You don't want to do stuff. You don't want to see people. You don't want to talk to people. And if you're not making that effort to maintain those connections with your friends, with your family, it's only natural for people to drift away. But a large part of that is because you're trying to protect them, almost. And when it comes to suicide, you feel like you're even more of a drag and everything than you are, and you believe in that moment that you're actually doing something selfless. You are taking yourself out of the world, you're taking yourself out of their lives, and you're making them feel better. You're making their lives better by taking yourself out of it. That's how you feel in that moment. So it's not selfish. It's a supreme act of selflessness. Even if that isn't what it really is, that's what it feels like to you. Subjectively, in that moment, you are a worthless, useless human being in pain, like a trapped animal wanting to gnaw its own leg off to escape. And you want to spare everyone else having to deal with your bullshit, look after you, tiptoe around your issues and everything. So you want to end the pain, and you also want to liberate other people. Like I said before, this is just the way it is for me, but I've spoken to other people who've had similar experiences. Now, for me, I've lost a few people in my life, acquaintances, friends, to things that either were suicide or appeared to be probably suicide. And so I know that that's not how it works out. The people genuinely are gutted and not relieved that you're gone. And that's helped hold me back a bit when I have been that low. So their deaths, in a way, have helped me cope with it all. What can you do? The sad truth of it is that there really isn't much that anyone can do. You can try to make people's lives easier so that this whole background of stress and anxiety and depression isn't built up by stuff going on in the background. You can be patient friends. You can check yourself, and you can understand in the way that you would for someone in a wheelchair. That you need to make accommodations, that you need to be understanding, and that occasionally they'll need help, but that they also have their pride, because we also have our pride in that we want to do things for ourselves as much as possible. It's hard. There really isn't much that you can do. You can be there when we're ready to talk, but trying to push a bit, which is something that was in Logan's video, that's not really helpful. You're putting people on the spot, you're adding to their stress, and it's not easy to talk about this stuff at all. I make a big effort to do so because I know it helps other people, but it's not easy for me by any stretch of the imagination to talk like this. And I'm just talking to a camera. I know people are going to see it, but I'm talking to a camera, not a person. If I was trying to talk to a person, it would be a lot more difficult. And that was always a problem with therapy for me, because you're talking to another person. It took me half the session to even begin to open up. But there really isn't much you can do. Campaign for reforms around funding for mental health, especially for men, and reform of the benefit system to aid people with mental health illnesses. Be there, be patient, try to help remove those background sources of stress in people's lives, but don't intrude, don't over fret, don't overcompensate. And when we can do something for ourselves, let us do it for ourselves. Because just like anyone else with the crippling industry, like I said, we've got our pride, and sometimes you want to do something yourself, prove to yourself that you can do something. I've been really ill for 4 months now. Not really able to work, not able to make money. You may not see that. We get very good at hiding how sick we are from people, and of putting on a brave face, and of doing what's absolutely necessary. but that hides a lot. So while I've been putting out a video nearly every day, that's because that's helpful to me. It gives me a chance to talk, sometimes to talk about things like this, which are important to me. And it's really, it's not work. It doesn't pay enough for work. It's therapy, and it's something I can do every day. That's relatively low effort. That gives me a sense of accomplishment and lets me keep going on. But honestly, these videos is about all I'm accomplishing at the moment. But that's what you see, and you see me on social media, and I'm sure I seem chipper and my usual sardonic, witty self. But a lot of depressed people are like that. What you see is just the tip of the iceberg. And when we're struggling, you may not even know. You may not even notice. But that doesn't mean you should go prodding. I don't know. I'm rambling now, but Logan's video was PR. It's just him trying to damage control and fix his image a bit, I guess. It wasn't particularly helpful for anyone who's depressed or suicidal. He didn't spend enough time talking to the people who mattered, who perhaps had something useful to say about it. It just really wasn't worth much of anything. Hopefully I've managed to relate in my own clumsy, awkward way what this stuff can be like and what you can do, however little it is, to help people. And hopefully, piggybacking on Logan Paul's fame, this will reach a few people that maybe need to hear a useful, non-narcissistic perspective. Zang.
Ah, pretty fucked up. Pretty fucked up now.